Hey, I'm Noura Howell. I'm a PhD student here at the iSchool, also a member of Biosense. So my promise title was Tensions of Data-Driven Reflection, a design study of real-time emotional biosensing. But one of the exciting things about being a PhD student is that we're constantly confused. Or, we're always getting to rethink what we're working on and develop our research. So I broadened, I wanted to update the talk to be what I've been thinking about a little more recently. And I'll ask you to bear with me. I've broadened the scope a little bit to be about emotional biosensing, possibilities, problematics, and critical alternatives. So real quick overview of what's going to happen. What is emotional biosensing? There's lots of this technology already out there. What does it mean? Embedded in that are questions about what can it do? What should it do? What is it telling us we should be doing? My argument is that current approaches are way too limited. So my work explores critical alternatives, ways of doing things differently, through designing and building biosensing technologies and then asking people to try them out and interviewing them about their experiences. So I'll quickly run over 3 projects. Different materials used for displaying data, different concepts for how we model and design with and work with emotion, and different kinds of what even counts as biosensory data in the first place. And then I'll end with some questions, no answers, about what might be different purposes for emotional biosensing. So what is emotional biosensing? Well, usually people are wearing some kind of sensor on their bodies, or it could be a wristband, waistband, measuring things like step, heart rate, skin conductance, but it could also be audio or video, facial, your face conveys emotions, and in that case, people might not even notice that they're being monitored. And then there are various sensors or algorithms that try to gain some idea of the person's mood, feelings, or affect. For example, if you're smiling, it might think you're happy. If your voice is really loud, it might think you're angry. Maybe an elevated heart rate is associated with fear or excitement. And then from there are a lot of different algorithms that try to figure this out, and a lot of things you can do with that data. And there's still a ton of open questions there, so I just left that as a question mark. Yeah, so a lot of biosensing technology already out there, as we've already been talking about all night. Some of it is emotional biosensing. For example, the Feel wristband claims to be the world's first emotion sensor and well-being advisor. It automatically detects and tracks joy, stress, distress, content, and sadness to help you monitor your weekly and monthly progress and discover emotional patterns over time. And the mobile app provides automated behavior nudges to help you stay on track towards meeting your emotional well-being goals. I'm just quoting from their homepage. Another common example is affective. They use video of face to detect emotions like smile, joy, contempt, and anger, and they promise to help offer unfiltered consumer emotional responses. So I think the founder was initially really focused on helping kids with autism learn to identify emotions in others, but the way that they've kind of the way that they kind of make money in some of their early demos is more around how are consumers responding to these video advertisements. Kind of taking a step back, there are some other examples. For example, the Muse headset that was monitored earlier offers to help with meditation, which is kind of an affective experience, it could be argued. So what kind of insight or meaning are these technologies claiming to support? And what can these emotional biosensing technologies do? Or what are they implying that we should be doing? Many of them are focused on self-improvement or self-knowledge, wellness or emotional wellness or mindfulness, through finding patterns over time. And a lot of it is guided by these kind of behavioral nudges about, hey, try doing this. And a lot of it is undergirded by these notions that machines can know how we feel. So there is definitely positive potential here, like helping people feel less stressed out, or helping kids with autism with socializing. Also, maybe some problematic stuff happening here, like making advertisements more emotionally manipulative. Or another kind of creepy thing, suggesting that we should be engaging in some kind of goal-driven, emotional self-improvement regime. I mean, maybe this is just me, but I'm not tracking towards my emotional self-improvement goals. I'm just trying to be a nice person, feel okay at the end of the day so I can get up tomorrow and do it all over again. So the emphasis on individual stress management also kind of brings in these issues where it can overemphasize that it's the individual's responsibility to deal with that stress. And instead of acknowledging that actually there's a lot of problems in broader society, like structural racism and poverty, that might be stressing people out. And a few deep breaths is really not going to help with that. After kind of looking at this space, I really feel like current approaches to what these technologies are doing, claiming that we should be doing, are way too limited. And that's why I want to go into my own work and my own approaches on different alternative ways of engaging with emotional biosensory data. So this is kind of my rough attempt at summarizing critical and speculative design approaches on one slide, so apologies in advance, but I explore critical alternatives through designing and building emotional biosensing technologies, asking people to try them out. And I draw from approaches in critical design, speculative design, reflective design. And so I kind of think of it as like a study in contrasts. So looking at what current designs are already out there and what they're doing, I ask, what values do they support? What assumptions do they embed? And then in my own designs, I try and explore something really intentionally contrasting to that. For example, supporting alternative values or inverting those assumptions. So the things that I design are not meant to be products that anyone will want to buy. Probably people won't even want to use them for a very long period of time. Instead, they're meant to explore alternatives, prompt critical reflection upon what technologies we already have, and help reimagine what technologies we might want to have in the future. So going in, trying to quickly go over some of my own work. I started out exploring different materials for data display. This isn't specific to emotional biosensory data. This could be any kind of biosensory data display. Oh, sorry, it's a PDF, so it won't play as a video, but you can kind of see on this paint projector, this one is actually white. All these other stripes are purple, and one by one, this white stripe is going to move across. So the fabric is changing color. And it changes extremely slowly. Over the course of 5–10 minutes, this whole swatch would change. So we were exploring displaying data in real time with color-changing fabric. And it looks and feels just like regular fabric, so it could be part of clothing that you wear in daily life. And to be clear, it's not giving off light. It is like a chemical-based color change. So we studied how fashion designers and just people who wear clothing imagined interacting with this kind of data display. And what came up was that the slowness and subtlety of this kind of data display were seen as assets for supporting fashionable expression and slower, more playful, or more mysterious engagements with data. So all that is just to say, the kind of materials we use to represent data have a big effect on the kind of interpretations and experiences that people might have with that data. This is one exploration into that space. Many other people work on different materials. I also have been looking at different concepts for biosensing of emotion. So a lot of the technologies we looked at are claiming to detect these kind of discrete individual categories of feeling. They kind of try to treat emotion like any other variable or state where, user.emotion equals happy. And we can think of that kind of happiness in one context as equivalent to happiness in any other context, even though we all know there are a lot of different kinds of happiness. So one issue of this approach is that context kind of gets flattened out. An alternative approach is where it treats emotion sort of as more emergent from interactions between people, something that's socially experienced, socially expressed, and really emergent from that context and situated in interaction. So this kind of shifts the goal, where instead of trying to get machines to know how we feel, the focus is more on supporting reflection and interpretation of feelings by people in the context of social interaction. So kind of combining some of these concepts, I made these shirts Ripple. They have a small pattern on the sleeve that changes color in response to the emotional biosensory data of the wearer. And I really wanted them to be extremely ordinary and everyday looking, so I'm actually wearing one now. These shirts respond to sudden increases in skin conductance, which is associated with various kinds of excitement. So skin conductance is essentially how sweaty you are, but microfluctuations are associated with excitement. So you can think if you're really nervous, you might have sweaty palms, or you could also just be really excited in a positive way or having a good conversation. And so skin conductance is kind of inherently ambiguous. It gives some indication of excitement, but it really doesn't get you any valence. It could be really positive, really negative. And so this work is currently under peer review, but it's kind of later in the night, and so I figured I would just share some of my results before the reviews come back tomorrow. So the display on here is pretty subtle. It's on the 3 pinstripes on the shoulder sleeve. And hopefully, yeah, you can kind of see in a response to skin conductance, first one would change color, then another, then the next stripe over the course of about 10 minutes. So you have about a 10-minute window to see this data display, and then it's gone forever. It's not saved. And so I asked participants to wear these shirts throughout daily life and kind of the reason I gave it this weird design was that, rather than displaying a particular category of emotion, it just suggests that the wearer might be experiencing a moment of excitement. So it keeps it intentionally extremely vague, trying to force the wearer to reflect on their own emotions and decide what they were feeling. Or, alternatively, someone else might see the shirt and ask them about it and prompt a conversation. I asked people to wear these shirts throughout 2 days of their daily lives and then interviewed them about moments when they noticed the shirts responding. And I asked them to participate as pairs of friends so they could not only interpret their own display, but interpret another's display. And in maybe a safer context, like if chances are strangers actually never noticed, and even if they did notice, you could just make up whatever story you wanted about your shirt. So anyway, on to some participants' experiences. Some seem to value the shirts for helping them reflect on their feelings. So one participant enthusiastically described this philosophical moment while wearing the shirt. He said, I was calling my internet provider, I was pissed off, I was really angry. It made me reflect on how situations are clearly transmitted into my body. Because normally, think about emotion as something that's not physical or non-tangible. But this was like, no, dude, these are emotions, they impact your body. So I think what I was hearing in here was something about how the data being displayed on the shirt, which is kind of literally our interface between our bodies and the world, helped him reflect on how emotions are embodied and physical. And Ripple kind of made this visible in a way for him to reflect on. At the same time, we also observed some tensions emerging. Some participants seemed to map a lack of display response to a lack of emotion. So one participant expressed concern that the shirt not responding might indicate that she was not a very emotional person. So at the end of the study, her shirt changed color, and her husband, who was her study partner and also wearing a shirt, said, according to the shirt, you have some emotions right now. And in response, she broke into a huge smile and exclaimed, yes, I have emotions. And this is the picture of that moment when she's like, yeah, see, look. And she's pretty happy about it. And her husband replied, see, you're not broken and unfeeling. And I kind of get the sense that he was quoting back to her a phrase that she had used in order to reassure her that this was not the case. So she seemed to interpret a lack of responsiveness as suggesting that she did not have feelings. But probably she was having calm feelings, but the shirt wasn't responding to those. So even though the shirt was very ambiguous about what it was displaying, it still seemed to have shifted like what counted as emotion in the sense of like what it responded to and what it did not respond to. So I was pretty surprised by this finding, and I certainly didn't want to help make anyone feel this way. So even though for some people Ripple prompted a kind of reflection they found valuable, for others it seemed to have the potential to foster or aggravate insecurities. Yeah, so I'm still kind of unpacking the kind of concerning findings that I got, but it is part of why I love giving my designs to real people, because it's so unexpected and I can't predict what's going to happen in daily life. There's a lot to chew on, but I want to keep moving right along to the third project, which is kind of looking at different ideas of what might get to be biosensory data in the first place. So here we looked at what if we could capture and preserve laughter that we might have or that our loved ones might have in interactions with us, and treating that as a kind of data to represent in these different ways. So different laughs could be represented as lights in a jar that twinkle on and off. Chocolate bar graphs could show the number of laughs that different family members had on different days of the week. Chocolate doesn't last forever. You can keep it for a while. You can eat it. You can give it to someone else. Or maybe a delicate bottle. You could open it, and it could play back one laugh at a time. And this is in collaboration with Kamiko, Elena, Dina, and Jiwon from HP. So here we're kind of seeing a shift in goals. So instead of self-improvement or instead of personal reflection, here the goal is more about cherishing or celebrating good moments with loved ones. So at this point, I mostly have a lot of questions, but I'm kind of looking at these different purposes for emotional biosensing. I've argued that prevalent approaches out there are already out there are too limiting. This stuff about self-improvement or self-knowledge, emotional wellness and behavioral nudges, yeah, I'm not really that into that, and I'm exploring alternatives. So, some of these I've looked at are what if it was more about cherishing or celebrating good moments? Going forward, I'm still curious about still other ways of interacting with biosensory data. So maybe instead of self-improvement, where we have this idea of an upward trajectory over time, it's more just about coping, where the goal is stasis and maintenance of we're doing fine right now, we want to keep doing fine in the future. Or you know, maybe instead of self-knowledge, it's just about self-acceptance or just enjoying the way we are right now. Yeah, so I don't really have any good answers to these kinds of questions, but I hope I've been able to share some of the questions I've been grappling with you all. Thanks.
So this is a great talk. The phrase well-being coach fills me with, I think, fear. I'm not sure. Maybe you can tell me what it fills me with. But that one slide you had of this participant who seemed to really want the device to tell them what they were feeling, it almost makes me feel that people want something like a well-being coach to help them be not unbroken or broken and unfeeling or whatever it might be. So, you know, are we the weird ones who don't want something like the well-being coach? Or, and you know, and how can we tease this apart, what it is that people want and what the consequences of that are? Is that something you've thought about?
Yeah, I've definitely been wondering if maybe I'm just the weird one, and if people do want a well-being coach, you know, I think that's great. People also go to like therapists and counselors and other kinds of coaches. I think, wait, can you ask your question again? What about, do we want people to say this? Yes, I think some people do. I think Natasha Dow-Scholl has some interesting work on how, you know, even with these like health decisions about like walking more and like monitoring how much water we drink, you kind of know how much we've walked and how much water we drink, but we want to externalize that responsibility to another device. So, I mean, if you want to look at like Foucault, it was more about like internalized self-discipline, and now we get to externalize that discipline and responsibility to another device. So I think there are like interesting shifts happening there. Yeah.
Similarly, I'm thinking of that subject who expected to have a result and then was disappointed when she didn't. And I was wondering, because I really like this idea of ambiguity, because it's not, we don't really have devices that are ambiguous with us. But I wonder how you frame your like shirts to people. Do you, like, is there a way that they're framed where they expect like a quote normal response? Or do you let even the explanation be sort of ambiguous to kind of see how it reacts? Because I would imagine like different people sweat more than other people, so like that might affect how it functions as well.
Yeah, so probably the way I'm explaining it is not the best, and definitely different people have different lability of skin conductance, I think it's called, where they, you know, maybe are more responsive or not on a physiological level. The way I explain it is to just say like a sudden increase in skin conductance is associated with various kinds of excitement, such as feeling nervous or feeling really happy and stoked. So I try to give a positive example and negative example and say that it's excitement, not emotion. But I think, you know, my hope was that this ambiguity would like open it up for people to have their own interpretations and feel like more empowered to critique the data or question the data. But I think that maybe there was a conceit there where I was only thinking about the device and the user, and I wasn't thinking about like the broader biopolitical narratives that are already out there. So I think in the face of this ambiguity, you know, they just drew from, you know, these kind of common societal like narratives that are already out there and use that to interpret it. And like maybe that's where some of the insecurity was coming from. I don't know.
Hey, Noura. Thank you for this great presentation. One of the things I'm wondering about, and I'm hoping you can say more about, is so on the slide with kind of the questions that you're raising and also the things that people have kind of brought up around emotional biosensing previously, there's a lot of self, right? A lot of self-regulation, self-reflection, self-understanding, a lot of self. But you mentioned this issue of the social.
Yeah.
And possibly having been a participant in some of these, I'm curious, like, if you can say more about those implications, like, not just how do I interpret my own emotions or my own experiences, but what implications might there be for that more social aspect? And I'm thinking about like the advertising as like the scary option. I'm like, oh, they're the other reading our emotions in order to manipulate us. But have you seen other kind of occasions where that social aspect is coming up, maybe in a more positive light? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely am interested in the social aspect as well. I think maybe two areas of that jump out to me are like this idea of social performance. So, you know, you see a coworker first thing in the morning before your coffee, you might still make the effort and smile and show that you're happy to see them, even though you're really just like tired and really need to get your coffee. So like, we definitely are like performing emotions, and I don't think that that's lying or anything. I think that's just socializing. And then, Yeah, so I think the idea of social performance and then also the social interpretation. So in that example, her husband was reassuring her that she was actually fine. And I saw another example where this man was like holding his crying baby and he was like, oh my gosh, my shirt is not changing color, but you know, if I really empathized with my baby right now, my shirt would change color. So like he went on this whole thing about how he didn't have empathy and he wasn't gonna be able to be a good father. And luckily the mother was there and she was like, no honey, you're fine. Like, so, yeah, I also think that like the way we learn about ourselves is, you know, other people help us along the way too. So, great question. Thanks.
So, do you ever worry about how this is being used? Like, I heard a talk last week about what it was, the quantified community, where there were people sensing, you know, everything, and they said we're going to add to social science knowledge by, you know, sensing what people's emotions are and then sort of developing new theoretical insight. I mean, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I find it pretty scary. That's part of why I'm motivated to do this. But I kind of see two strands of the quantified self, I guess. One strand being like people who buy like this Fitbit product and are like, okay, I walked 10,000 steps today, I'm good. And so kind of adopting the like normative standards that are, you know, these devices are embedding, you know, maybe to be helpful or to simplify a complex space. And then there's kind of the like more extreme quantified self users where it is very much about this individualization and saying like, no, other people's standards do not work for me. I'm going to track my own data and make my own standards. So I see like Don Nafis talks about this possibility for soft resistance and the idea of collecting our own data and using that to make our own claims about ourselves. But yeah, I guess I'm always just worried about these kind of like normative standards that get embedded in things. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.